And I'm talking about Poonam Goyal, who is with us. Poonam Goyal is the sector head and senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, covering e-commerce and athleisure retail. She has been in equity research for over 18 years, starting her career at Goldman Sachs and then transitioned over to Bloomberg Intelligence to help start the retail equity research effort over there. Ms. Goyal frequently features across a multitude of news mediums and participating in events like ours today to share her deep insights and expertise in the technology and markets she covers. Poonam, it's a real honor to have you with us. Thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your wisdom and expertise with our global audience today.
Great, thank you, Jose, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm super excited to be here with you and share what I think is truly going to change the way we live, the way we work, and the way that we expect from retailers. So I think, when we talk about artificial intelligence, I have to think about where we were and where we're going today, right? So if I think about the last 20 years, and really, since the fold of the century, we grew up in a world where information was not that easily accessible. At least in my time, I had to go to a desktop, find internet connection, find data, and the speed was slow. But today, we live in a world where information is at our fingertips. We may have more than we can imagine. We have too much, and we don't know what's right, what's wrong, what matters, what doesn't matter. So what do we need today? We need someone to be able to curate that information. We need someone that can basically tell us, hey, this is what you may be interested in. And how do we do all this? We do all this by having someone or a computer in today's world analyze what we want, our preferences, our choices, our history, and tell us, hey, based on all of this, this is what you're interested in. And that's really the core of AI when I think of it. It's about taking in data, both qualitative and quantitative, and really understanding that to help predict. And the key here is predict. You want to be able to predict the user's feedback and be able to predict what they're thinking about next. And the better you're able to predict that, the better the technology will become and the better your results will be in anything you're trying to achieve, whether that's efficiency, whether that's conversion, or whether it's just a deeper connection with your customer. So I think AI really sits at the core of everything we do today. And any organization that's not understanding the data that they're seeing is making a mistake. So the key is really to take everything that you have, filter it down, and give back to the customer what is really needed to improve either their day-to-day life or your own workflow. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. And I think, when we talk about AI, we have to really think about why AI is so important. And I'm going to take you back here to this slide. This is analysis that we at Bloomberg Intelligence did earlier this year. And when you hear any industry sources talk about e-commerce penetration, and this is important because as
real quick, we cannot see your presentation at this point. Just make sure you hit the button that says show my screen, the present under sharing, so that we can see that.
I apologize. 1 second, please.
Perfect. We can see it clearly now. Thank you.
Great. I apologize for that. So here, what we've done here is we've basically taken a look at e-commerce penetration. When you look at some industry sources, and if you looked at them prior to the pandemic, they would tell you that e-commerce was less than 10% of total retail sales. But that's not really true because e-commerce isn't just done by the e-commerce players. The brick and mortars are also doing e-commerce business. So what we did was we took the data. We took the data of online retailers. We took the data of brick and mortars online sales component, and we married them together to find out what the true underlying penetration was. And ahead of the pandemic, it was about 18%, which is great. But the pandemic fueled an acceleration in e-commerce because now people that didn't shop online had no choice to shop online. People that didn't want their groceries picked, now were getting comfortable with having their groceries picked by someone else. And they were getting used to curbside and delivery at home. So we saw an acceleration in e-commerce sales that really upfronted innovation by 3 to 5 years, taking the penetration from 18% to 24% here. That's a 6 percentage point gain and pretty meaningful in actually just a matter of months. In March 2020, retailers had to innovate, brands had to innovate. They had to use the underlying data they had to take the platforms they had, and they had to innovate them. They had to bring forward technology that they thought would have taken 5 years. I mean, if you go back to pre-pandemic, how long did it take brands to roll out buy online, pick up in store? It was a multi-year process, but it happened within a matter of months during the pandemic. So what happened from there onwards? Where do we see e-commerce going? And here's why we think that AI needs to be implemented in a more meaningful way, because e-commerce penetration is expected, based on our estimates, to go from 24% in 2020 to 33% in just 3 years in 2025. That's a meaningful acceleration in e-commerce, despite what we just saw over the pandemic. And a question I often get is, well, e-commerce sales are slowing this year. We saw that in the first half, where growth rates actually came down. Rightfully so, they did come down. But part of the reason that growth rates in e-commerce decelerated in the first half was really twofold. First, it was because we were up against some very tough pandemic-driven comparisons. There is no doubt that people still want to shop stores. And as stores reopened, people did go to stores. And the second, we no longer have government-infused money in our pocketbooks in the US, which means that you have less to spend. And when you do have money to spend, you're spending it where you choose to spend it. We hadn't traveled for a long time. We hadn't went out to restaurants because we were stuck at home. So some of the dollars in our pocketbooks are now going towards experiences versus things. And that said, we still expect a 13% CAGR in e-commerce sales over the next 5 years. And that is driven by two things. One, a gain in digital commerce, pure play retailer sales, and two, an acceleration in brick and mortars e-commerce sales. So let's go to the next slide here. When we talk about digital commerce, 60% of the e-commerce gains between 2020 and 2025 will be driven by the digitally native retailers. And Amazon is a clear standout. When you think of Amazon, you almost think of a black box, right? There's so much going on there that you really don't know what is driving the insights and the growth that we see there. But a big part of it is the ability to analyze data. If you think about Amazon and how it's structured, and let's just talk about their retail marketplace for a moment. Over 50% of their sales comes from third-party sellers. So when you think about that and you think about how much data they have at their fingertips to really make better judgments on what products they bring to market, how they make products available, what products they feature, how when you search an item, you get not only third-party products, but also their own product, which represents over 40 to 50% of their business, featured. That's all driven by AI. In the back end, the best search engines are ones that can filter what you want and deliver to you the right product or a choice of products where one will closely match your needs. And we see Amazon doing this pretty well, along with many other retailers. Google's a great search engine where now I think you can see, if you take a picture of something that you saw as you were walking down the street, if you put it in Google Lens, you'll get a search result that's much better today than it was 5 years ago. If I can tell you 5 to 10 years ago when I tried some of these new technologies, and I would scan a picture of someone on the subway, and I'm like, oh, that bag is really cute, or those shoes are really cute. And I would scan a black bag, but I would get back a brown or a blue or a red bag. Today, that's not the case. Today, when you scan that black handbag, you get black bags. Some are similar, some are not. But the search has improved. The analytics have improved. And that's all a function of utilizing AI better, whether it's visual, whether it's voice, whether it's just purely search. And we see Amazon driving 50% of the growth in e-commerce going forward. It's a beast. Amazon is expected to do $1.2 trillion in online sales in 2025 or in 2026, based on our estimates. Over $1 trillion in 2025 and 1.2 in 2026. So pretty big and very important. But it's not just Amazon. Stores will also play a key role in driving e-commerce growth, whether that's the Walmarts of the world or the mom and pops of the world that are using Shopify to engine their sales, or whether it's a person sitting in their home who's creative, a mom, does sewing and knitting and wants to sell some masks, which was big during the pandemic, and Etsy showed up as a great example of how to bring forward small companies or even individuals' creations to masses. We are going to continue to see lots and lots of activity in e-commerce from all sorts of angles, whether that's the large retailers or the small retailers. It really doesn't matter. The growth in e-commerce is here to stay, and we expect double-digit growth for the next foreseeable future, definitely for the next 3 to 5 years. That brings me to my next point. So how are we going to drive this growth? What is going to drive it? So when you look at this chart, you see lots of different places where growth can come from. But really, let's focus on the channel. And there's one channel that I think is going to truly drive the next leg of e-commerce growth once executed right. And that is social commerce. So social commerce is more recent, meaning in the last 3 to 5 years, we have really seen an acceleration of engagement in these social channels, whether that's Facebook, whether that's Pinterest, whether that's YouTube, but people are attracted to hear what others have to say, to see what others have to say. And the creation of content is happening without asking for it. So if you think about how brands promoted items in the past, there was a whole marketing scheme. They paid for that advertisement. Today, yes, they still pay for that advertisement, but they also have free advertisement. Now that can be both negative and positive, but you're truly getting user feedback. So what do you do with all that feedback? For in the initial stages of social commerce, that feedback was often lost. And you kind of saw things coming in, but they were lost and you moved on to the next thing. Today, what companies are doing is they're digesting that feedback. And that feedback is not quantitative. Most of it is qualitative. So how do you turn qualitative into quantitative? And AI really helps you do that and then give back a result that can help you streamline your own operations, your own workplace, but also deliver a better customer experience. So I'm going to talk about social commerce a little more here. And I think one of the things that we are pretty new to, in fact, I'd say that we haven't done as much as our counterparts, or what you could say is in China. So if you see the chart here and you look at how millennials and Gen Zs are today engaging, what you're going to see is that video commerce is a big driver to success. Now, when you speak about video commerce, it's really not new to the US. Think back to QVC. We all grew up in an age where there were shopping networks on television and many people watched them and transacted that way. Today, that's morphed into the online realm through a mobile device or through the World Wide Web on a desktop. So in China, if you look at this chart here, $60+ billion of online sales came from video commerce. That number is expected to grow tenfold in 2023. That's just 4 years. Over $600 billion in sales in China will come from some sort of video shopping. So what does that mean, and why has it accelerated so much? And where does the US stand? In the US, we are just scratching the surface. We too are going to see robust growth in live streaming, but we're expected to go from $10 billion to $23 billion. So nowhere near the explosion that China has seen. But why is live streaming so important? What does it help us do? It helps us form a two-way connection with the consumer. And live streaming is something that you can have a branded executive do. You can also have an influencer participate in live streaming. And influencers are key here, whether that's live streaming on TikTok, whether that's a video on Instagram or on YouTube. But influencers really help drive the sale home because they're trusted individuals that people relate to and trust to use their judgment and apply it in their own day-to-day life. So we do see an acceleration in live streaming in the US. We are expecting it to increase at an even faster pace as more people and more technologies are integrated in the live streaming platform to make it a frictionless and seamless experience. And the data that you get from the live streaming is key because purchasing power of knowing whether the influencer you use or the ad medium that you use, what's the transaction, what's the conversion there. And I can tell you that conversion in the online realm has been in the low single digits. But when you incorporate a live video, that conversion rate increases to about 10%. There's some examples here that we can talk about. Whether it's LeBron James and his lifetime contract with Nike, Poshmark, where sellers promote other sellers. And that's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because why would I, selling something, promote someone else? But it's happening. The world is more connected today. Revolve is one that I admire a lot, where I think they really lead with an abundance of influencers to drive interaction and sale. In fact, eBay is now using influencers to help them promote that buying resale is not only better for your wallet, but it's also better for the planet. So a picture's worth 1,000 words and a video is worth even more. And I think that is the future of shopping. Now, these are some of the stats that I talked about earlier, but here's just, where live streaming is very popular. 36% of live streaming targets apparel and fashion. So we are moving forward when it comes to apparel and fashion. But the second player, or the second category, I should say, is beauty. And it's at a distant second at 8%. So clearly a lot of opportunity here. We talked about conversion being 10 times higher than conventional commerce. And 17% of US consumers frequently watch influencer shopping live stream. So that's a pretty significant number. And there's a 76% increase in live stream shopping purchase during the pandemic, which kind of makes sense, right? You're online and you're watching videos, you're trying to be more connected as you can't step out of your house. So lots of interesting stats here that I think can really help drive conversion higher and using the data findings behind that. But a really interesting example, and one that we haven't talked about, is how do you use video and data to bring forward an experience that was more physical into a digital realm? So here I'm going to bring forward a makeup brand, L'Oreal. So if any of you have tried this, it's pretty impressive. So they have a virtual try-on makeup app. It's essentially bringing home the person that you would talk to in person at the counter into a virtual appointment. And they look at your skin, they look at what you're interested in, and then they recommend a product and show you the product, how it looks. So just think about that and how much time that saves the customer and how effective it is for the brand to be able to use technology, use tools that are now available to them, and the insights that they've collected over time, that data that they've taken in, to really form an informed decision and help that customer make a selection that they're actually proud of and that they'd want to do over and over again. There's really no better way to get insight than to take the interactions that we have and digest them and interpret them to then spit back out something that's actually useful for the brand and the customer. So that's a little about the backdrop of why artificial intelligence is so important, and e-commerce, the growth in e-commerce needs artificial intelligence to improve and needs more people to digest that information and really help solve problems in both the consumer's life as well as the brand's life. So where are we in AI? And AI, a word that people throw around all the time, but what does it really mean and how is it helping? To me, AI is basically the interpretation of both qualitative and quantitative data that yields responses to make better decisions, both for the brand and the customer. And AI is growing. Retailers' AI spending is estimated to more than triple from 2020 to reach 29 billion by 2025, according to IDC data. That is what you see here. And what you can see is the uses of AI are broad. They're really broad. So far, we've only touched on speech, vision, and natural language processing, but there's so much more. And some of the other things here that are linked to speech and vision, that AI isn't even limited to retail, right? We're talking about AI in retail, but AI can span across verticals, pharmaceuticals, hotels, automotive. There's so much that AI can be used towards that we're just really scratching the surface. But for my discussion, since I'm a retail expert, I'm going to stick to retail and e-commerce. So where are retailers investing and where will they invest tomorrow? Let's look at this slide. Digital, commerce, and customer service are the top two areas where retailers are currently investing and where they'll continue to invest. Once the customer is gone, it's very, very difficult to win them back. So you need to get it right the first time. And how do you get it right? You have to make sure that you offer them with things that they value and that they want to return back to you to make that transaction. A turned away customer could be a lost customer for life or be a very expensive acquisition going forward. So how can AI improve the user experience? And I'm going to focus on this slide for a few minutes here, but let's talk about the curation of content. And when you think about that and why it's so important, it's important because we have more data than we ever had before, and we need a filter. I am inundated with thousands of emails in my inbox. Come see this, come check this out. Here's Father's Day, here's Mother's Day, here's a bunch of things. But at the end of the day, there's only so much of your attention span that you're willing to give to marketing. And how do we make that simpler? We need to be able to curate product, but you can't curate product unless you know what the customer wants. And no customer is the same. I'm not the same person as my friend, nor my mom, or nor a stranger alongside the end of the road. So how do you cater to me? What brands have been able to do with AI is customize the offering and customize the marketing approach. They are now tailoring web pages to match me, but it's not perfect, right? I can be searching for an item for a newborn baby because I have to attend a baby shower a week from today. So it's great that you're sending me advertisements and products for new baby products for the coming week, but 2 weeks from now, that doesn't matter to me because that's not part of my life. It was a gift that I was shopping for. So how does the computer recognize that? And is there a way to connect the experience between a web page, between a social platform, and look at how I'm browsing, what I'm browsing, and make connection between the different areas that I am in and that are trackable? And I think it's drawing that connection that's really going to improve the AI journey going forward. Because right now, while we're looking at it, we're really looking at things in isolation, right? So if I'm shopping at a retailer's website and I'm looking for, let's say, that baby product, that retailer is inclined, based on my search, to recommend those items. But does that retailer know 10 days from now that I've stopped looking for that item? Because on my social platform, the baby shower is now long and gone, and there's a way to identify that. So there's a lot here, but I think the brand should always talk to the individual, and brands that can do that well are the ones that will find greater success. Some notable examples where personalization has really made progress. And I'm going to go back to Revolve. At Revolve, they use a recommendation algorithm to create and stock curated shops for each customer. They use machine learning to create collaborative filtering, complete the look, for example, similar items, recommended for you. These are all things driven by AI that really help improve the user experience. It's really a marketplace that curates a unique shop for each customer based on their preferences and their profile. It even integrates highlights from social media feeds of images of its influencers to send out timed notifications. Other examples include North Face coat recommendation, where they ask the user their needs and then they respond back with a coat that matches those needs and the lifestyle that they prefer. Sephora uses face scan to recommend skincare and makeup. And we talked about that a little with L'Oreal too. There's also fitting apps, right? So what shoe size are you? Nike Fit, for example, or another app can really help you reduce returns. Returns is a growing problem in the industry today, not because people want to return everything they buy, but it's because of the growth in e-commerce. So if you think about it, when you buy something online, you sometimes buy multiple sizes or multiple products, knowing that you have time to return them. And as e-commerce rises in penetration, so do returns. But these returns are often received at a point in time when they're no longer able to be sold at the full price. So they're marked down substantially, which really hurts the gross margin, and sometimes even sold to off price at pennies for the dollar or donated. So it's a big hit to retailers' margins, and it will continue to be so until we can perfectly match or closely match what the size is, what the preference is to the supply that we have on hand. Etsy uses XWalk to leverage machine learning and AI capabilities. 95% of purchases came from items on the first page of search, up 10% from a year ago when they implemented XWalk. It shortens the time to search to purchase. So there's a lot going on here. In fact, if you want to improve conversion rates and average order value, you have to integrate AI in your everyday findings as well as build that platform, because the more data you digest, the stronger the platform is. Data is underlying to success in either a physical realm or even a digital realm. So let's talk about here voice. Voice has grown pretty substantially in the last few years, and part of that is because of the devices that now enable voice recognition, whether that's Alexa or Google Home, whatever it may be. There were 120 million users using voice assistants in 2021, and that's growing to 130 million. But what's key here is the percent of the US population. 48+% of the US population will use voice in some way or another. In customer service, chatbots reduce customer service costs by 30% and resolution time from 38 hours to 5.4 minutes. That's something that IBM had predicted. And a chatbot can answer 4 out of 5 questions. Think about the human labor that's saved and the cost that an organization can save by implementing chatbots or some form of automated service into their organization. 31% of companies, in fact, plan to deploy chatbots in 2021. Chatbots not only help with the customer service angle, but they can also help find items in a store. Macy's, for example, you go onto their app and you're looking for this denim jean and you don't know where to find it. You can use the chatbot to help you navigate where in the store that item is. Once again, it reduces the friction, it's convenient, and it solves the problem, and it helps increase conversion of that customer walking out of the store because they can't find a representative to help them, or because they can't find the item and they just don't have the time to browse for hours and hours. eBay also has a chatbot called ShopBot, where it helps answer specific questions to users versus browsing through millions of items that it has on its own system. Whole Foods has chatbots to find specific ingredients based on your own dietary requirements and restrictions. And chatbots aren't still perfect today. I think there's a lot of work being done on them, but as they get more data, they will get better. They're already better than they were 5 years ago. As I told you, I recall when I used to use Amazon Music, and I would ask them to play a song, and I would get a completely different song played. I mean, like remotely different, maybe 5-7 years ago. Today, when I ask for a song, I get a choice list. I get to pick, it sometimes plays the right song, or it'll say, here are your options, and my song is in one of those choices. So they've definitely come a long way. So let's continue this discussion, solving a problem in retail that exists and has always existed and may continue to exist. It's inventory management. If we think about 2 years ago when we were sitting in the pandemic, inventory was hard to find. There were delays at the ports, there were production delays because of COVID-19. But that inventory is piling today, and you can see that here. This is US retail inventories year-over-year growth. It's up 20% at the latest data point, and that is far outpacing sales growth. So what happens when inventory mounts? You get markdowns, you get old merchandise sitting on the floor of the shops and online, and it makes the customer experience more restrictive because now they're seeing old inventory with new inventory. Typically, the time to get inventory in the US, because we consume almost everything that is imported, and we are an imported nation, especially when it comes to apparel. 90+% of what we consume is imported, and largely most of it imported out of Asian countries. So how do you optimize inventory? And AI is really, really key here. I visited Rent the Runway distribution center just a few months ago, and it was so interesting for me to see how the life cycle of a garment can be expanded for them using just data. What they do is they're the one company that has access to post-purchase data. So think about that for a second. When you as an organization sell an item, you have data on the customer until the item reaches their home. But what's interesting about Rent the Runway is they have data on after the item is in your home, because you're renting a garment and you're sending it back. So that process from when you have it to when you send it back, you now know how was that garment used, how well did it wear, how many cycles has that garment been worn, because how many times have you rented it, what has fallen apart, what can be fixed. You take all that data from thousands and thousands of reviews, and then you go back to the brand and you say, your button is always falling off at fifth wear. This dress does not wash well. The garment needs to be adjusted. Data really has improved or helped improve the quality that's being manufactured in garments today with those that have access to it. In fact, as you can see here, in 2025, in 2025, 75% of retailers will have incorporated some sort of inventory management and AI use of data. So AI doesn't end just there, though, right? We also have seen artificial intelligence play an important part in stores. If you think about an Amazon Go store where you walk in and essentially you basically can walk out without having to check out with someone, without having to talk to someone. And Amazon knows that you've purchased a gallon of milk, you've purchased a bottle of water, and a bag of chips. And they know your purchasing patterns, so they know how to better stock those stores and what sells. And that's been the case for years, but to have that frictionless experience where I can walk in and pick up a water bottle and just walk out, it's super easy, and it really helps solve the process. There's also virtual dressing rooms, right? The interaction of selecting and unselecting in a virtual dressing room. In the past, when you tried on 10 pairs of jeans at American Eagle, they didn't know what you were trying on. They didn't know what sizes you were changing it for, or when you were switching from one jean to another. With these virtual fitting rooms, now they can see your thought process. They can see, okay, she tried on a skinny jean first, and then she didn't like that. She went to a high-waisted jean. That tells you something. And the more data that we can digest, the better the learnings will be for us to make changes in the product and in the customer service, and to really provide the customer with a frictionless shopping experience. What I spoke about right now were just a few ways of how AI is used, but it's not that easy to use AI. It's actually getting harder. So we have data that we can monitor on our own platform, but recent privacy rule changes are making it harder to digest and collect a lot of data that was once readily available to us. So I think we have to work around those issues and really find a way. You know, when Apple made those changes where you now have to ask for permission to see customers' data, not many customers are willing to give permission when asked because no one wants to be tracked. So how do you go about solving that problem? It just makes it harder. But I'm sure there will be ways to come around that. And hopefully the customer opens up to letting brands and companies track their information, as they know in return they'll only get a better user experience. So I really think that we're making headway, but there are obstacles coming in the way. But at the end of the day, whether you want to improve your own operation or the customer journey or increase conversion, you need to analyze the data available to you in all shapes and forms. And only then will you be able to make better decisions to really help improve the process. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Jose, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Poonam, thank you so much. What a great presentation, insights on retail, on e-commerce, on the markets and the applications of AI. We really appreciate that coverage and the insights you have shared with us. Have lots of questions here from the audience, and please keep submitting your questions. I'm monitoring them coming in. Wonderful themes you have brought up for us to discuss with Poonam in the next few minutes here. The first one comes from someone who is leading digital transformation for a big brand, Mars Corporation. And Lee Bogner is a leader for digital transformation for Mars. And he first says, excellent, Poonam. Thank you so much for these insights. And he's curious about your approaches on, if you could comment a little bit on brands, on approaches brands may use to evolve into AI and progress further. Where to start, crawl, walk, run. You know, if there's a perceived gap with the market leaders, if you will, if you're starting right now, what do you think is the best way of approaching that brand journey and using AI in that journey?
Sure, thank you for the question. So I think the short answer to that question is you have to be where the customer is, right? If your customer is in the store, you need to be in the store, and you need to monitor. You basically need to walk with them. You need to see when they pick up that item from the shelf, when they put it back, how many items they pick up. Or you need to be with them in the digital realm. How are they going from browsing to purchase? Or do they abandon the journey in the middle? And how many times do they do that? Are they on social media? Are your customers more on Pinterest than on Facebook? Are they more on YouTube than on TikTok? Where is your customer? And wherever they are, you need to be there. And then you need to really take in their actions and study them and learn from them and then implement your solution. Because I think what a lot of brands do is they go to where their channels of distribution are, right? So if I am a wholesaler and I am selling into Walmart, I will look at what my sales from Walmart are, and I will use those metrics to make decisions. But that customer that's buying from Walmart, maybe buying from Walmart online, maybe buying through a social media feed, or maybe going into the store. So can you get access to those points and see that data? Because that's truly going to help you make a more informed decision.
That's great insight. And you talk a lot. It's interesting that you talk about, and several people picked this up, that you talk about the importance of big data, if you will, and to build models and so on and so forth, on the technical side of AI. But you also talk a lot about the user experience, which almost feels like sometimes observations and maybe a bit of small data as well combined with that big data. So can you talk a little bit about, because for some time big data was all the hype, it was all that people were looking at, and then there is this kind of a new thinking around combining that with small data that can be smaller data sets with higher quality and insights like the ones you're mentioning, perhaps from observation. And I think you're saying it's not one or the other, it's a combination of the two. But if you can talk a little bit more about big data and small data.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a marriage of the two. You need the big data because that's your underlying thesis, right? Anytime you're writing a thesis, you need the data. You need the true quantitative measures that you have because I can get all the qualitative measures that I want, but if I don't have the quantitative, how do I figure out what to do? But at the same time, the small data tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about the behavior, about the psychology of the customer. And I think in order to be smarter, you need to know that. And you really need to find ways to digest that. Now, I'm not a computer scientist, so I don't know how you implement those data feeds and how you really put them together. But I think the more that you can take that small data, because it helps you look forward a little better. Remember, the big data is all historical largely. It's things that have happened in the past. But how many of you do what you did yesterday today? How much of it, right? So it's really the small data points, the observational data points that help you understand the psychology of the customer. And I think that's very, very important. And that's what makes the difference between a good brand that's going to get higher conversion versus a brand that's going to get lower conversion.
That's excellent insight. Thanks for sharing that. Another question that came up has to do like a few weeks ago, we actually had a big retailer and was talking about the something that you discussed in your presentation, the increasing inventories in the United States, and they're actually using AI to make some decisions about their return process and whether not only whether or not I'm gonna take that return or if I'll just say, hey, I'll keep the product and I'll give you a full refund, but the decision making behind that to avoid fraud and to prevent fraud and to prevent certain patterns on customer behavior that could show up as fraud. Are you seeing more? Tell a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the applications of AI maybe on fraud and security. Are you seeing changes related to this inventory issue and maybe any other retail trends that are out there that are making AI uses in inventory management, for example, a bigger deal today than it used to be maybe just a couple of years ago?
Absolutely. So shrink is a growing problem in retail, and it always has been. And the only way to really avoid that is to understand where it's coming from and how it's coming. Why is it product spoilage? Is it theft? Or is it just fraudulent returns? And usually it's a combination of all three. But using the data that you have at hand, what we're seeing retailers do is to attack the returns is reducing that return window. So what we've seen actually in the last year is many retailers have shortened their return window. What used to be a more graceful 1-year return, 90-day return, has now come down to 30 days or 14 days. And I think part of that is driven by the learnings of AI, where if you had purchased a dress 6 months ago and now you bring it back to the retailer and they take it back, they can't sell that dress, right? That dress is one-off. It's probably going to get donated or go to off price, and they lose money on that dress. So how do they solve that problem? And I think they've learned that even if they reduce the window, their core customer will come back, right? So it's about deciding between the high value buyer and the low value buyer. And brands and retailers are now working to maintain and accelerate growth within the high value buyers. And the low value buyers, it's not like they don't want them, but they're not going to cater to them. They're going to cater to what drives their business to be more profitable in the longer run. And AI is at the underpin. It underpins all of that. I mean, it's really driving decisions. It's telling them that we see a pattern from this group of customers. So here's where you can forgo the customer to keep the profits higher, right? It's all data at the end of the day that's coming together to help make better and more informed decisions.
Very good, very good. That's a great insight. Alex Stevens asking a question related to technologies related to AI that you see being implemented in retail, and I think you already covered this, but not to leave any stone unturned. I'm going to follow up here. Is there anything that you may not have commented on in terms of new technologies that you see in retail coming down the pipeline? They may be in the beginning stages, like self-checkout. Amazon made quite a bit of a stir with the full store that you can do the self-checkout on. And anything like that, or in any of the areas of retail that you see new technologies that may at this point seem interesting, that may mature in the next few years?
Absolutely. I mean, I only had 30 minutes, so I couldn't touch on everything. But metaverse. I mean, think about how shopping will take place in a virtual environment that's not real, right? I think we're toying with that idea. I've seen examples where brands have created and gamified products in a virtual environment to help them bring to life real products shortly thereafter, because they've seen that these products are being implemented, are being used, are being sought after, so they've provided early learnings. And then the ability to transact in the metaverse, right? We've seen this across brands like Nike, Adidas, and even some of the luxury brands, where they're really testing and playing in the metaverse, and items that they've brought forward have had great sell-throughs and great insights into their pipeline of future products. I think we're just scratching the surface here. There's a lot to be done, but it's definitely an area that companies and brands are playing with.
Terrific. Poonam, we're out of time right now, but I want to say on behalf of our global audience, thank you so much for your generosity, for being here with us, sharing great insights and expertise and wisdom that you continue to develop and share with the world, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate you being here with us. And so on behalf of our global audience, deep heart thanks for you taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That was Poonam Goyal, leader at Bloomberg Intelligence, and sharing her wisdom and expertise with all of us. What a tremendous presentation, great insights, wonderful questions. I'm pumped up with all these questions that came up that were, I could not cover all of them. Make sure that you go on LinkedIn. You can ask follow-up questions on the post that I put on the chat, so you can connect directly with our speakers. And this is just the beginning of our journey today. We have 3 other very exciting speakers joining us next. We're going to another big brand company, Nestle, and we're going to have the head of AI talking to us about artificial intelligence and Nestle, followed up by the Center for Sustainable AI and a presentation on socially responsible artificial intelligence. And we're going to be wrapping up the day with a wonderful presentation with the Chief Technical AI Officer at Boeing, and we're going to be learning from the latest implementations on and the technical advances of artificial intelligence applied to aviation. So we have cross-industry experts joining us next, and I'll see you back at the top of the hour. We're going to close the session now. If you have any follow-up, want to connect with our speakers, go onto LinkedIn under my name, Jose Perez on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to see the post, and you can connect with the speakers, ask any follow-up questions. And I will see you back in just a few minutes at the top of the hour with Carolina, the head of R&D, innovation, and artificial intelligence at Nestle. Thank you for now.